Hello, everyone,
Go
and
on.
welcome to Be Well with Michelle Greenwell. All of us have relationships with COVID. We may have gotten sick from it, had a family member get sick, perhaps we've even known a loved one who's passed away. We've been in lockdown, had restrictions, been challenged politically, and we've had our worst fears about the survival of the planet put before us. Sounds like a doomsday kind of chat, doesn't it? We could look at some of these ideas and the effect that it has had on our health and wellness. But today I want to talk about resiliency and surrender. That is, when we let go of the angst, what transpires in our discovery? How did the lessons of the day and the internal ways of knowing bring us into a new state and a way of being? There are some real transformations taking place in our world and within each of us. And today's conversation is about the insight and where we can go from here. I'm thrilled to introduce a very special friend from the dance world. Melin is an author, choreographer, historian, lecturer, and dancer. While flying to see his mother in March of 2020, before we knew much about COVID, he contracted the virus and fell deeply ill. And this in itself is a story of survival and the will to live and the power of love that was able to pull him from the depths of that disease. And today we will be chatting about life as a long hauler and what it's like to be living after recovery from COVID. This isn't your typical discussion, however, because would I ever deliver anything straightforward? Today we have the discussion of memories and awareness. How do you know what you know about your past, and then what triggers those memories, and how might they be stored within you? Mats will be sharing his insights and experiences with losing his sense of taste and smell, and then what it's meant to his memories and also resiliency. This is episode 12, The Power of Memory with Mats Melin, and welcome to Be Well with Michelle Greenwell. Hi, Mats.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's so great to have you here. And of course, just to be celebrating the fact that you survived COVID. You are a long hauler, but you're here with us, and we're so grateful for that. And I've had the privilege of having many great discussions with you since that time, and just kind of the voyage of your recovery and bringing everything back to where you are present. And it's been quite a voyage, hasn't it?
It has indeed. And in one way, one could illustrate it with coming to a complete full stop with everything in life, and then rebooting and finding new pathways. Working as a lecturer, professor at the University of Limerick at the Irish World Academy of Music and Dance, lecturing on ethnochoreology, dance history, teaching step dancing, Cape Breton step dance predominantly, but also indulging in Scottish, Irish dancing and various other aspects. Life in a university is more than full on. It's 24/7. Your mind is always on something you should have done earlier. And at the time of COVID kind of becoming perhaps the most talked about feature in the world, I was preparing master students, PhD students for their next tasks. I was teaching undergraduate students new routines for their performances later on in the semester, and doing all the other admin and research and planning that you do on a daily basis without really thinking much about it. You just get on with the work, but you're doing probably 3 or 4 people's jobs if you start adding it all up. But as you said, my mother back in Sweden, as I work in Ireland, and I've been away for 26 years now, she was turning 80, so I had planned to travel home and see her. But as I flew over, whilst in the air, lockdown mechanisms hit. So when I did arrive in Sweden and got to my mother's nursing home, I was not allowed in. And I spoke to the manager at the door and sent messages and what have you, and then spoke with my mother on the phone from just a few meters away, but that's just life. Seeing how restrictions were coming in, flights were being curtailed, I decided to fly home early. And my middle daughter, who was at home with me, she asked me to come home earlier because she was getting worried. So didn't think much of it, got on the plane a few days earlier and flew home from Stockholm to Dublin. On the flight, I kind of realized that the person behind me was coughing a lot, well, constantly for 2.5 hours, but didn't really reflect on it as such because didn't know really what it meant. Didn't really sit next to anyone on the bus down from Dublin to Limerick. And then when I got home, I decided maybe as a precaution, people were saying, please self-isolate. So we kept ourselves to ourselves and organized for food to come to the house and what have you. I thought we'll just give it a week or so and see what happens. And 2 days later in the evening, I went from feeling absolutely fine to just falling sideways on the couch and knew that something was terribly wrong, and it was not the flu. It was something very different. And to cut a long story short, being at the beginning of this pandemic, the hospital systems and testing systems were not quite up and running. So it took quite a while to get tested. So I was well over 2 weeks at home getting worse every single day until my middle daughter Ingrid told me that I should go down and see my doctor, which I did. It was a struggle to get there. My driving was not the best, shall we say. And my doctor took one look at me, put me on oxygen, and sent me in an ambulance into hospital. And in hospital, I got fantastic care by staff who worked what seemed like around the clock and who were dealing with new information on a daily basis. I also saw people around me who were not as lucky as I've ended up to be and who did not make it, which makes you think twice. But I did, and I think this is what your question was, I did come to a complete halt, maybe second or third day in hospital. I was not on a ventilator, but I was on oxygen, and I was feeling completely out of it. And at one point, I was trying to get in touch with family and have you to give some important information, and I didn't make that. I just went into some very narrow world where it was just me, and I found one thing to focus on, which was my wife's face and my children, because otherwise the whole body, the whole system, every nerve ending was screaming, give up, just let go. And afterwards, when I reflect on it, that was incredibly unnerving. At the time, I decided, no, I am just going to fight this somehow, consciously, subconsciously, I don't know. However, with the strength of the relationship between myself and the rest of the family, I kind of pulled through. I don't know how long this period of extreme sort of intensity, I would call it, darkness, light, whatever, everything was fuzzy, lasted. But somewhere along the line, I seem to have gotten adrenaline boost because I kicked out of it. And it took many, many days to kind of turn it all around physically. But at least that was a turning point. And I would say that was when my life came almost to a full stop. Could have been the end. I can see how people who are elderly and maybe do not have as much as I do to live for, if you get that sense in your whole system to give up, you probably do. And the virus is devious. It seems to attack you where you are most vulnerable. The professor treating me said that the people in my room at the hospital, same virus, but different symptoms depending on where we were the weakest. So one was more lungs, one was more heart, and I seems to have been mainly sort of nervous system and cognitive function, because my mind just switched off. I was really, I would say a good word is fluffy. in the head, had problems comprehending things. And I had lost taste, or the sense of taste, the sense of smell. Any food given to me was like cardboard. I survived on drinking a lot, water, tea, just about nothing else. The people who were providing the foods sussed that I needed more cut up vegetables, yogurts, that sort of thing, rather than a big slab of fish or something that would come in. And yeah, it just they to me they looked the same whether it was fish or meat or chicken, and they certainly didn't taste anything. Very strange feeling to sit there and look at things that you know what it is and it's not recognizable because there's nothing to your senses, no smell, no taste, and your appetite is definitely on minus. Good way of losing weight fast, but I wouldn't recommend it. It was not not a good thing.
I do remember in one of our discussions that you had said you knew that you needed to eat. So you actually, despite the fact you couldn't smell or taste it, you just instructed yourself to put the food in anyway and to make sure that you were nourished.
Absolutely. Yeah,
and I know for some
absolutely.
people
And
sick, they would do it the opposite way. They just not eat because the appetite isn't there. But you actually took a different approach.
well, I thought if I'm going to win over this strange virus that clearly is everywhere in my body because you didn't feel like yourself, and in fact I haven't felt like how I was before COVID since I got it up until now. I am a different being. So many things have altered in the system, but yes, you're right. I decided that the only way to pull through is to put different types of nourishment in, and not only food and drink wise, and because I have a pre-existing kidney condition, they gave me extra water and what have you, which really helped. So I'm really thankful for that. But I nourished myself with, I was lucky to be in a corner of the room where there was really good Wi-Fi, and I had my phone there so I could listen very quietly to music. So I listened to Cape Breton fiddle music and Scottish music as much as I could, and the music kept me going. And after that, I decided to read, to not just to make time go, but just to try and keep my brain, my functions, awareness alive. But interestingly enough, I found that reading in English was hard at that moment. So I managed to get a message out, and books in Swedish were passed on to me from home. And I read crime novels in Swedish, which are really exciting. But it was interesting that I kind of reverted back to my mother tongue. And that's also a kind of reboot. I didn't have a problem talking to staff or anything, but then again, you didn't have much of a conversation with them. They were extremely busy because it was panic stations by the sounds of it most of the time, not necessarily in my room, but in neighboring room in this COVID corridor that had been created. And those are aspects of things that I did. And of course, talking to my family at least once a day with every single one of them, short bursts, because I remember it as I talked for long periods. They tell me it was a maximum of 30 seconds, maybe a minute, because that's all I had strength for. I felt it was hours I was talking to them, but they said no, it was, you ran out of energy quite quickly. So it's interesting how the perspectives are on two sides. I thought I was spending loads of time, but no. Yeah, and of course, there's nothing you can do. And I can only add that I felt sorry for the staff. Clearly, something happened because the oxygen supply to our room broke down. At this point, I didn't need it, but some of the others did, and they were being moved anyway because they were not making this journey any further. And also the hot water broke down. So I suppose they tell you that cold showers are good for you, and I can assure you they were invigorating. And there was nothing the poor nurses could do. They informed staff that this was not working, but yeah. So maybe the cold showers helped. Certainly it revived me on a daily basis.
Oh, so I'm just thinking about one of the things we usually start off the episode with is something about tea. Always trying to bring that in. And you and I have shared a lot of cups of tea. And you were here for a visit on a sabbatical and writing one of your books, actually, at the dining room table. And so you and I shared a lot of cups of black tea. So is that what you prepared today?
I am indeed. It's just, as they say, cooking tea normal. I think it might be Earl Grey actually at the moment that I picked, but yeah.
So, and
It keeps me going.
I've got broken leaf, which is a different way that they cut the tea. But I picked out my winking glass because I was thinking about all the jokes we told at the end of the table as we were busy working on our projects. And when I asked you what mug you brought today, yeah. So I know we have an audience that can see, but for those that can't, you want to describe what's there?
Well, it's the many faces of a ninja, and the faces are the same, whether it's happy, sad, angry, scared, shocked, or surprised. That's what it says on it. I did not pick this mug. I think my daughter gave it this morning when I drove her to the train station to go to college. That's the kind of wake-up routine. I get a cup of tea, so I am awake enough to drive.
So if we look at the idea of the ninja, and when I talked about resiliency and surrender as kind of our theme for today, you and I have had lots of interesting discussions, but this week we got into the discussion about memory. And now that you've told the story of losing the sense of smell and losing the sense of taste, and now your reflections that you have on your awareness of those senses, do you want to talk a little bit about how that's really awakened and actually become almost front and center for memory for you?
Yeah, I think that those experience from the hospital stay and then eventually getting home thinking I've got through this, I will be able to go back to work in a few weeks after I kind of gained some strength, and then this strange all these strange symptoms appeared, and it took many months before we realized that what I'm dealing with is long COVID and quite a number of symptoms. And I'm not going to go into all of them, but the worst two is the extreme fatigue where you feel you got sandbags on your shoulders, and sometimes it can hit you so quickly that you kind of go, oh, I need to lie down, and you don't make it to the bed or the sofa. You just lie down on the floor and sleep immediately, like 3 paces. And the other worst one for me, who normally, if I hear a tune, I can name it. Dance is just, my body knows what the steps are. I can teach it at the drop of a hat. Normally, I don't need to consult the written descriptions. It's just there. Same when lecturing in ethnochoreology. I tend to just need a quick scan of the papers and go, oh yeah, it's this material, and then I can go in and deliver a 2-hour lecture to my students. All of a sudden, the brain fog, as I now know it's called, hit, where this intense mush behind your eyes seems to take or block the entry point for your senses and your consciousness into the brain, where clearly everything is stored. You just can't get through. You can't remember things from long ago to begin with, or definitely not what happens just now. The last 20 months has been a lot of, why did I go upstairs? I have no idea why I'm here. Why did I enter this room? Why am I standing at the cupboard? What am I making? I have absolutely no idea. If I've had periods of, you remember something, and by the time you get a pen and a pencil, it's gone, and you have no way of retrieving it. So that switch from being able to retrieve fairly effortlessly the information needed to not being able to reach your own self is disconcerting. You get frustrated, you get angry. But over the 20 months of this long COVID, there's been some interesting changes that currently my short-term memory seems to improve, but the long-term memory started triggering things that I cannot recall having had those memories in a conscious way anyway before, and triggered by a smell or the sense of not well can be well the touch of wind, heat, cold, rain, anything out there can trigger a split second really sharp memory of sorts, not necessarily to do with dance. I've had memories of clearly where I'm close to the floor in the flat where I grew up. I recognize everything is kind of fuzzy further out, but just next to me, I can recognize floor carpet pattern, parts of a wall, and I know, yeah, it's from there. And then it's this sort of the sun is shining and hitting me, and it's that triggers the memory. Or there is sound of rain on a window nearby, and this memory is triggered. So I find that really intriguing that I can place where I am, but not exactly the time. But considering I'm sitting on the floor, I must be really young. So, and I'm not necessarily playing, I'm just experiencing a moment. So who knows when it is, but I do recognize it.
And it's
And I can
coming.
sometimes
Sorry, I was just going to say
hear.
it's. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, it's just that you don't really hear any voices. Nobody's talking to you. It's not like you hear your father or mother or anyone else. It's kind of these particular images are just fairly silent apart from the triggering noise. If it's rain on the window, that is one I've had, or if it's sun, particular heat of the sun coming through the window or through an open balcony door or whatever. So yeah, I find
And
those really interesting.
and as you're saying that, are those times that were joyful times or calm times even? Does it appear to be
I
those?
would I would say stress free.
Okay.
You weren't required to prepare. We live in a stressful world. I have realized that since having to reboot, that is constantly trying to catch up with things that are impossible to fit in and do on a daily basis, whether it be, well, the combination of personal life, what you want to do with your children and work requires really 3 or 4 times the time you actually have if you're going to do everything. It's impossible. And I would say that I now feel I have, over for many, many years, prioritized the wrong things in life. I have achieved a lot with work and dance and choreography and what have you, but I've also lost out on time with the family, especially the children, because certainly before I got the university job, I was freelancing, so I was on the road most of the time. So you're away for 2, 3 months sometimes because there's not enough time to go home and say hi. You just go on to the next point. So missed birthdays and other important days. And quite often now when the children are talking about, oh, you remember when we went to so and so, and you kind of go, no, because I probably wasn't there, but yeah, but you had a good time. So I suppose the family connection in my lowest moment in the hospital probably triggered a kind of rethink of what is important. And the fact that the post-COVID symptoms have forced me to stop, slow down in everything to, oh, it's been down to a quarter of the speed. Maybe now it's more like 3/4 of the speed. That goes for walking. Have not really, up until just a few days ago, been able to dance with any success. Even just doing things, I've had to just bring it down and do it slowly, deliberately, one task at a time, which is often what you tell other people to do, and then you try and do 52 things yourself at the same time without being successful in any of them, really. I'm finding that doing things slowly now has made me more productive in a way. Surprise, surprise. I shouldn't be surprised, but it took me to get this ill to kind of stop and rethink. And over the last 20 months, when restrictions for travel, etc., has allowed, I've spent a lot of time with my family because some of them live in Scotland and I'm here in Ireland. So I've been able to spend time with them and spend time in nature, sit on a beach or being amongst the trees or whatever, and just be in the moment, because often being in the moment has been the only thing I could do. I could not, if I planned something forward, I wouldn't remember it. If I was trying to remember something that someone told me or something that I know I should be doing something, but what it is not coming to me, you just have to adjust and go, and then enjoy when memories are triggered and find new pathways of, can I sometimes more instinctively find new pathways of triggering a memory when I actually need to.
And that lends itself to a couple pieces in there, because a lot of times we focus on, we have a trauma and what is the trigger that brings you back to the trauma. But you're actually talking about the triggers that are sending you back to times when you had peace and you had calmness and just being present. Because it's not even that memory of, Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas morning or something like that, where you're seeing that play out for you. It's really just that, what is that sense and that feeling that comes in. And I'm fascinated that it's coming through the senses. Like you said, you hear the rain or you smell something and it instantly takes you to that place. And I'm wondering if sometimes we focus so much on that trauma piece, which is valuable, but what happens if we do go to the place of calmness and we do go to those memories that are being awakened by our senses?
Yeah, indeed. And I suppose I have trained myself when I wrote my PhD on various aspects of Cape Breton step dancing and how the dance is part of the much bigger cultural, that it's just a facet of interconnected cultural expressions in the place. And I wrote a piece of recollecting step dancing in getting up to perform a series of steps in one of the halls, West Marble, no, not West Marble, it doesn't matter which hall it was. And here's COVID kicking in. I can't remember things like that anymore instantly, but it doesn't matter. I was asked to go up and dance, and the segment that I describe over a good many pages is maybe a minute and a half. And the only live memory I have is that I was actually filming the other dancers, and when I got the nudge to go up, I gave the camera to someone sitting beside me, thinking that the person would film me when I got up, but I have a minute and a half or 2 minutes of the ceiling. So I have the music, but I don't have actually what I did. But the soundscape helped me to recreate a kind of an amalgamation of all the times I've got up to perform, what goes on inside your body, how you can see the musicians who are behind you in your mind's eye and see how they move, how they communicate, how they look at you or any other dancer that's out in front of them, the interaction between you and the fiddle and the piano in this case, or if you're dancing to the pipes, your interaction with the crowd around you, what you experience in both seeing them, but also just being concentrated on what your body is doing and feeling the steps, the movements that you're performing, and that you are, in a way, responding and thinking about things a fraction of a second after your body already decided what next step or next movement to do. So you're kind of always in the slipstream, reflecting on that, oh, somebody just opened the outside door because there's a fresh breeze coming in, hitting you in this sort of steamy dance hall, and smells from 200 people who are taking a wee break watching the dancers, and all of these things. And I've kind of consciously looked at those aspects of using all your senses in remembering how you dance, but also see how I can trigger learning and teaching, or transmission is probably a better word, in those ways with my students particularly at the university. And I've been lucky to work with some absolutely fabulous young Irish sean-nós dancers who already come in with a natural ability to just respond to the music, and they can come up with lovely ways of combining movements and making up new steps. But if you're teaching them something specific, I kind of started looking at them and wondering, what we use all our senses, but there's always one sense that might be more predominant to ourselves, whether we're aware of it or not. So are we a person that predominantly listen? Are we someone who feels it kinesthetically? Or are we someone who watches, learns through seeing things as the primary indicator of the information you need to work on? And I tried to figure out that, okay, if I've got 3 people in front of me and I've sussed out through my relationship to them in the classroom over time that, okay, each one of them prioritizes actually a different sense of learning, how can I quickly give them all the information they required, verbally, visually, sound of my feet, or taking the person's hands and dancing a step so they actually feel my movements, etc., etc. So I was working a lot with that and finding that if you really hit those mechanisms and you're in a good connection with the people you're working with, the speed at which they pick up increases, which is not necessarily always the best thing. But if you're in a university context where you have 12 weeks of classes and then something has to be performed and graded, you have a time constraint, as you do in a workshop. If you do a weekend workshop, you got so many hours over a Saturday, Sunday to pass on information. And if there is a way of passing that information on different levels, almost more or less simultaneously, or repeating the message of how something should be done, but with a different priority each time, I have found that it speeds up the learning of the recipients of the information. So I'm acutely aware of my own body and what's going on. Quite often I can feel muscles working and tendons and what part of the foot is hitting the ground or whatever. And then coming out from the hospital after my COVID experience, and it was not there. It was largely hidden in this sort of brain fog. And the symptoms over the 20 months have come and gone, but two symptoms that I found most disconcerting was that I could be just walking straight forward and with no warning, no dizziness, I just fall sideways, on one beat. It's been a couple of times I've been in a kind of more narrow corridor, and all of a sudden I hit the wall rather than continuing forwards. And you kind of go, what happened there? Because otherwise, if you're, the experience of if you're sitting down or bending forward, and then you stand up too quickly, your head tends to spin. It wasn't like that. It was just like no control, sideways, bang. And at one point, for a period of time, I lost the ability, because I could drive. I've been able to drive through this and focus on being safe, and I wouldn't go behind the wheel if I wasn't safe. But at one point, I hit a problem where I was going to reverse, and actually reverse onto a ferry. And I've done this for close to 30 years with this particular ferry and this crew of people that I know up on the Scottish Islands. And I had no idea how to reverse. I had no idea to translate the signals or how to steer or whatever into an actual action. And it was so immediate when it hit me that I just had to call one of the crewmen over, who were not allowed to drive or reverse my car because of COVID restrictions at the time. So they just had to tell me and turn that steering wheel this way, put it in reverse and what have you. And it was really, really strange not to be able to do something that you don't even think about normally. Luckily, I can now reverse again. It didn't last that long, but it did last for a while, and it made me think about what is actually going on with this virus and what is it affecting in your, not just your brain patterns, but I would say just your communication with your whole system, with your body. And when this happened, I decided, even though I couldn't dance, I was going to try. I'm so used to being able to dance and teach that either I have my back to the dancers behind you and I dance the same as them, or I can just turn around and I dance mirror to them. The dancing the mirror had disappeared as well. I could not translate in my body to do the opposite to the person in front of me. That has also come back now. But for a while, those aspects of what you do almost, well, in my case, on a daily basis, and I don't even think twice about them, were inaccessible.
And one of the things you talked about the other day was how the sense of smell and the sense of taste all of a sudden became predominant. And being that was two of the senses that disappeared with COVID, how it's kind of come to the forefront. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I seem to, over the last, the last 20 months, react stronger to scents, particularly if you're outside, or tastes. And there's some things which I used to drink a lot of coffee, and I've lost the taste. That's not come back. It just doesn't taste anything. It's that one is still kind of gone. I've tried it a few times, and it's just like, I don't know. Doesn't matter. Tea, different herbal teas and what have you, I can taste all of them fine. So that's one example. But perhaps I've had time to, as you gear down and go slower, to allow yourself to be in the moment and listen to what goes on around you with all your senses, your whole body. And that's why you're picking up on a particular smell, or I seem to feel whether there's cold air, hot air, whatever on your face, your skin. And that seems to also channel then those memories that I discussed earlier. And I haven't really been, because of COVID, been in any dance environment, teaching studios or dance halls or whatever, but I've always, certainly when I worked around the Scottish Highlands and other parts of Scotland, every time you walk into a new environment, there's a particular scent of that place. If I say to people that if you think of the gym hall in your school, sweaty shoes and feet and what have you probably comes to you as a kind of memory that we have all experienced. But here we're talking about old wooden community halls that have seen parties and dances and you name it, for decades, maybe half a century, even more in some cases. And it's like everything is a memory in those walls and floor. And you kind of pick up on it. I certainly do. I feel all those things and just try and connect with it. And in the last, well, when I've been up in Orkney with my wife, trying to recover and what have you, taking a walk down on the beach, and you've always heard the sounds of the sea and water coming up on the beach, and you can hear all the stones rattling as they move, and then you hear seals and seabirds and what have you, and you recognize them. Now I was just listening perhaps more intently, hearing other nuances of it, and feeling great benefit from it, feeling that it just helped me to stay calm and becoming energized in it. Same with listening to music, and now when things are hopefully changing for the better, I can start moving again a bit more normal. So something that has always energized me is dancing, whether with a partner or a solo step dance, and just feeling you're moving through time and space and being in particular environments that interact with you and the people in the environment. But it can be simply being in a studio on your own, just working on something, or like in this kitchen, working on something.
As you're
So
saying,
yeah, those.
as you're
Yeah,
saying
go
that,
on.
I'm thinking about, for me, I haven't really taught dance since we closed for COVID, and so I've spent most of my time now on a computer. And what I've noticed for myself is I've lost the ability to move. I actually don't know how to move because dance was just so much a part of everything that I was doing. It was the kinesthetic part of my memory was all wrapped up in dance, um, and so many events in my life have been around dance. And then it's like cut right off. And it's like if somebody asked me to go move, I actually don't know how I would do that, which sounds really weird from a place of someone who really understands the body and how it moves. But it's almost paralyzing because as a kinesthetic learner, I use that sense so much to bring in how I'm learning things. And I've completely had to change all of that. So it's interesting as you're explaining those pieces, what our different situations present us with, and then how we can pull out new awareness, new opportunities of being, and then really look at, are we optimizing? And if we're looking for that joy and that resonance or the ability to be really thriving, can we pull those senses around, like you're saying, when you're at the beach, pulling in other aspects of the beach than you used to? How can we encompass that and really support ourselves through our awareness? Creates for some interesting
I,
thoughts.
yeah, I have one. I remember not that long before I took ill. One of my students at the university, he's from Donegal, absolutely fabulous fiddler, bouzouki player, singer, Cahal O'Curran. And he was sitting in our cafe in our building and having a tune with one or two others, as is normal for our part of the university. And I had just was in the middle of doing too many things, decided I needed a coffee, had just run down, got it. And as I'm passing him, he just hits that tune that just wants you to dance. So I put the cup down and just started step dancing, and he reacted to that. He's very good at playing for dancing. So we just had that kind of moment for maybe a minute of me dancing, him playing, and then other people joining in. And then I took my cup and went back up to my office. But didn't think so much of it at the time because you were just in that fierce flow of having to get the next thing done. But now I think back on it, and I clearly my body and my mind picked up on other things going on in that moment that is just stored somewhere. inside you. So I've been able to kind of go back to it and enjoy it more as a memory than maybe I did when I actually did it in real time. I did enjoy it immensely at the time, but there was certain things, and maybe it's just the way that he plays those tunes and the choice of tunes that were just right for that moment in time. But I've felt other layers of communication and what have you, because it's not just about the fiddle and the bow, but it's also his foot tapping and the way they, quite often, if they really engage with you, the musician will lean towards you and you will dance closer. And those little seemingly small things, but really important things, they come back to me now much stronger than I thought they would.
And what you've kind of weaved through the whole story today, which is something we didn't really talk about per se, is that constant feeling of connection. You had your wife right there, you had the kids there, and that connection there. I know when we heard, that you were in hospital, there was like the dancers around the world just came together and we did one big hoopla for you. And, to send the energy and support for you. So there was that connection again. And what you're saying now in relationship to the musician and the dancer is there's this lovely play that goes on when we communicate with each other, and then what that means for us, lifting us up to go to the next thing that we do, or just lifting us up and walking in that joy, and walking the beach, because yes, you can walk by yourself, and when you do, you're connecting then with the birds and the water and those pieces. But if you walk with someone else, you have a second connection that's in there, which is again another place of resiliency and rebounding.
Yeah, and resilience, a thought that just came back to me about lying in your hospital bed here in Limerick, and the nurses and doctors were in and out constantly in your room. So you never really relax because they check up on you and the other people in the room all the time, it seems. But there was a sense of removal. Yes, they might take your blood pressure and they put the cuff on your arm and what have you, but they're in several layers of protection, PPE. They have goggles and visors and masks and gloves, and all you see is eyes and eyebrows. That's about it, and you hear voices. But you don't know anything about what they look like or how they would normally, and you don't even have their names, because their name tags are on their uniforms, which are under several layers of protective gear. So you learned after a while that, that's the nurse from Spain, and that's the nurse from the other side of the country, and you got to know them that way. And if they told you your names, my brain just didn't register. I was really annoyed at that point that why can't I remember the nurses' names? There's not that many of them, but just didn't stick. But it was that sense of removal from what is normal, that you can shake somebody's hand, or you can at least see what they look like facially. And here, no idea.
Yeah, and it really
Didn't
has,
take away from the level of care they gave you.
when you think about too, having the masks on, there's so many faces that we don't know who the people are, or sometimes you don't even recognize your friends when you're out somewhere because they've got a hat on or whatever, and all you do see is eyes, and all of a sudden you don't know who that is, because there's so much recognition that does come from what you visually see. But it is interesting then to know what are the other senses that have come alive, because you do have eyes that you can make eye contact with, but what are the gestures that person uses? What are the ways that they move? What do they smell like? Yeah, what is something that brings that awareness in? Or the way they say things too, when you recognize voices, and you go, I know exactly who that is, and you haven't seen anybody yet. Yeah.
I think if I did have a smell, which I didn't, but I think the main thing you would have smelled in that room would have been hand sanitizer.
Yes. And what does that say about memory too, right? Because
Mm.
because we had so much of that at the start, and that just completely changes because that same smell just keeps coming up all the time. And how
Yeah.
do we transform from that? And for those people who may have trauma that results from that, how do you shift it around to the smells that bring you comfort and the ones that you do remember from the kitchen, even if it's toast in the toaster, and what does it smell when a casserole comes out of the oven? Those
Mm.
those subtle little pieces, and how we bring that awareness in as a support system. So we're not always just about what is the other side of the trauma, what are the triggers, but what are the pieces that really feed us information and keep us aware. Yeah. Lovely, lovely thoughts, isn't it?
It is, and I would say on the whole, it has helped me refocus on a new path in life, spending more time with the family, focusing on items in life, tasks that energizes me, and taking that energy and make sure it nurtures me and anyone around, because that's the only way forward. And at the moment, I'm still very much at one day at a time. One day at a time. That's the only. We could do another podcast on all the different things that goes on in the sort of post long hauler COVID, but I would say the aspects we discussed today is the positives that I've been able to kind of take out of the experience. And in some ways, I've managed to hone in on them and make the most of them. And without analyzing too much, just feel them and take the positive energy from them and use them to move forward in life and time and space.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about just some of the work I'm doing and some of the conversations around mindfulness and awareness. And they often go to, focusing inside. How is your breath? Noticing that deep breath come in. Where might you have tension in your body? But in the conversation about working with dancers, and it could be working with anybody, but I know that's our platform, but working with those dancers and having them take the time to do a kind of meditation like state and really lock into what is the sense that provides you with the most information. What do you really gain from your senses? And then how do you use those senses going forward in the things that you're doing? And so for those listeners that might not be a dancer, they may be thinking, well, I don't know if that pertains to me. But if you're thinking in terms of people in an education setting, or you want to learn something new and you go to take a class for interest's sake, then to be able to really think about how can I engage all of my senses while I'm in this experience, and what might I learn differently because of having done that? And then what does that mean for recall later on when the memory isn't there? What does it mean for the recall later on if you want to engage in the material in a different way? So I just like to leave that thought for those people that are listening or watching, and to go play, see what it really does mean. It's an interesting
I have one.
gift that we can bring
Yeah.
out. Go ahead.
Sorry. I have one thought. One aspect that has hindered me, and luckily it's getting better, is the breathlessness that was a part of coming out of the hospital. Yes, I do know from the scans that my lungs were scarred from the initial onset of the virus. And having been in a position where I could teach for hours on end, give instructions while I'm dancing, to first time going outside for a walk, maybe 3 weeks after, or 2 weeks anyway, after coming home from hospital, and really only getting 30, 40 meters before I was bent double and gasping for air, because it was just not getting into all parts of your lungs. I accessed an acupuncturist who was willing to come to the house weekly and give me treatment. I connected with a breathing specialist who gave me various breathing exercises. I used the singing bowl that I got a few years ago, lying and just placing it on my chest, and sometimes with warm water in it to kind of help opening up the breathing and just feeling those things. And I also accessed a martial arts, I think he's 12 times black belt of different disciplines, but he did some fascia massage on my back, which it was painful, but he was the person who managed to open up my lungs so I could breathe all the way down to the bottom and do proper breathing, and it never closed up again. Luckily, I was able to kind of keep them going. So I would say all those aspects also helped in the recovery over the last 20 months. The thing is to keep at it. You do various things, and then as soon as you feel a bit better, you tend to let go. But I'm learning that it's the constant practice of, maybe not all of them on a daily basis, but a routine of that it all happens at least weekly, some of them more than others. With your heightened awareness of things, all those aspects of how you deal with life works favorably for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking about two tips that you and I talked about a while back that probably just went into the into the memory somewhere and may not have come back out. But just for those people listening who have breathing challenges, one of the things that you can do is tap your hand from your shoulder down the arm with firm tapping all the way to your palm, and 3 times down one arm and 3 times down the other arm. And that actually will open up all the villi in the lungs and give you a much deeper breath. And the other is you could just hold onto your thumb. So while you're sitting, just being able to take one hand over the thumb and just hold onto the thumb. And that's another way. The end of the energy line for lung is on the thumb. So I'll just give those 2 tips out in case anybody listening, that's something that they have. And we have 2 points on our collarbone. If you go on your collarbone out from the center, about halfway across, and just start rubbing with your fingertips into the, just below the collarbone, there's 2 points there that also can open everything up. So I know there's lots more that we can do, but that'll at least get people started. So I think we'll bring this part of our discussion to a close, Mats. I know you and we have lovely conversations about all kinds of interesting topics, and I'm sure we'll be back with something else to offer people to think about. But thank you so much for sharing with us today.
My pleasure. It's always a special time to talk to you and share your knowledge and exchange ideas, and I would say energy as well, even though we are across the Atlantic. But at this moment in time, we're just together in the
kitchen at the dining room table. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. So you've been listening to Be Well with Michelle Greenwell, and be sure to check out the other podcasts that you can find on Buzzsprout, Spotify, and Google. You can also find them as a face-to-face recording on YouTube. As well, you can find lots of resources on the playlists. So if you look up Michelle Greenwell, you'll find that on YouTube. And if you want to learn more about Mats, his scholarly publications, you can find him at matsmelin.com, matsmelin.com. Thanks so much, and have a wonderful day.